The city lights twinkled like distant stars, casting an ethereal glow over the bustling streets below. It was a view I had always cherished, a symbol of the vibrant life that thrummed through the veins of the metropolis. Yet, as I stepped through the front door of our apartment, the familiar hum of urban activity seemed a world away. The silence within our home was striking, a stark departure from the symphony of sounds that usually greeted me. I had left the office earlier than expected, the weight of the day's meetings and endless paperwork driving me to seek the comfort of my own space. I anticipated finding my husband lounging on the sofa, a glass of whiskey in hand, or perhaps Julian, my stepson, engrossed in one of his video games, the volume turned up to drown out the world. Instead, I was met with darkness, save for a narrow band of light that peeked out from beneath the living room door. A flicker of concern crossed my mind as I quietly pushed it open, half expecting to find an intruder. What I discovered was far more unexpected. There, on the plush cushions of our sofa, lay Julian. His athletic form was relaxed, yet charged with an intensity that was palpable even from the doorway. The television cast a soft, flickering light across his features, contorting them into a mask of concentration and pleasure. His hand moved with a steady rhythm beneath the fabric of his shorts, the unmistakable outline of his arousal straining against the material. A wave of shock washed over me, my breath hitching in my throat as the reality of the situation registered. Julian, my stepson, was caught in the throes of self-indulgence, completely unaware of my presence. The magnitude of his endowment was startling, a testament to his maturity, and it was on full, unabashed display. For a moment I was frozen, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. There was embarrassment, a deep discomfort at having intruded upon such an intimate act, but alongside it, a flicker of curiosity, a forbidden desire to understand the young man he had become, stirred within me. It was a thought I quickly pushed aside, the guilt that accompanied it gnawing at my conscience. Julian let out a soft moan. His eyes closed as he lost himself in the sensations of his own touch. The sound snapped me out of my reverie, and I realized I had to leave before he noticed me standing there. With as much grace as I could muster, I retreated, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The journey down the hallway to my bedroom felt like an eternity, each step heavy with the weight of what I had witnessed. Once inside, I closed the door behind me, leaning against it as if to physically bar the unsettling emotions that now threatened to overwhelm me. The room was a sanctuary, a private space where I could process the evening's events in solitude. I moved to the window, drawing the curtains aside to gaze out at the cityscape. The lights twinkled back at me, indifferent to the turmoil that raged within. As I sat on the edge of the bed, my thoughts refused to coalesce into any semblance of order. Julian's image was burned into my mind's eye, his substantial size, the look of pure, unadulterated pleasure on his face. It was a side of him I had never seen, one that both intrigued and disturbed me. I undressed, my movements mechanical, and slipped beneath the covers. The cool sheets against my skin offered little comfort as my mind replayed the scene from the living room over and over again. Try as I might to banish the thoughts, they persisted, wrapping around me like a silk shawl on a sultry summer evening. I lay there, the darkness enveloping me like a cloak, yet offering no respite from the relentless replay of the evening's encounter. The walls, once a testament to my sanctuary, now seemed to press in upon me, a silent witness to the turmoil that churned within. Try as I might to banish the thoughts, they clung to me with a tenacity that was both maddening and oddly compelling. Julian's visage, so unintentionally exposed, was a specter that refused to be exorcised. His substantial size, the sheer maleness of him, was a revelation that shattered the image of the boy I once knew. As the night deepened, my struggle against the tide of my own desires became a futile endeavor. There was an allure to the forbidden, a siren's call that beckoned me towards the jagged rocks of ethical transgression. I found myself adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions, where guilt and excitement collided with the force of two mighty waves. In the solitude of my bed, I allowed my hands to roam across the familiar landscape of my body, each touch a betrayal of the maternal role I had so carefully cultivated over the years. Yet the traitorous thought of Julian's hand in place of my own sent shivers of anticipation coursing through me, igniting a fire that had been dormant for far too long. I indulged in the fantasy, allowing myself to explore the contours of my need, the aching hollow that yearned to be filled. The pent-up longing that had been building within me since the moment I laid eyes on Julian's exposed form now demanded release, and I was powerless to deny it. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as I navigated the treacherous waters of my own arousal. The excitement of the taboo, the thrill of imagining Julian's hands, his mouth, his body claiming mine, was a potent elixir that clouded my judgment and fueled my desire. As I reached the crescendo of my self-pleasure, the boundaries between reality and fantasy blurred into obscurity. The waves of ecstasy that crashed over me were both a sanctuary and a sentence, a moment of pure, unadulterated bliss that was tainted by the knowledge of its wrongness. In the quiet afterglow, as I lay spent and struggling to come to terms with the depths of my own transgression, the weight of my actions settled upon me like a shroud. I had crossed a threshold, not merely in the privacy of my own thoughts, but in the very essence of my being. The night, once a haven for reflection and repose, had become a stage for my own moral drama, a narrative in which I had unwittingly cast myself as both protagonist and villain. And as sleep finally claimed me, it was with the heavy heart of one who has glimpsed the abyss and found within it a dark reflection of their own hidden desires. The dawn would break soon enough, casting its unforgiving light upon the secrets of the night. Julian and I would face each other across the breakfast table, the mundane ritual of morning greetings fraught with the unspoken knowledge of what had transpired within the confines of our respective solitudes. Would he see the change in me, the subtle shift in the way I looked at him? Would he sense the newfound awareness of him as a man, and not just the boy I had helped to raise? These questions hung in the air like specters, haunting me with the promise of revelations yet to come. As the early morning sun cast a warm amber hue over the kitchen, I found myself methodically performing the rituals of breakfast preparation. The sizzle of bacon in the pan, the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee brewing, these sensory experiences were usually a comfort, a reliable constant in the ever-changing tapestry of our lives. But today, they were mere background noise to the tumultuous thoughts that swirled in my mind. Julian, now a university student, had grown into a man of striking maturity and independence. Yet the previous night had stripped away the layers of academia and ambition to reveal a vulnerability that had taken me by surprise. As I set the breakfast table with careful precision, my thoughts were consumed by the memory of his unguarded moment, a moment that had laid bare his most primal desires. The sound of footsteps on the stairs signaled Julian's descent from his room above. He entered the kitchen with the casual confidence of youth, his laptop tucked under one arm, a textbook clutched in the other hand. "Morning," he mumbled, setting his things down on the counter before helping himself to a glass of orange juice. "Good morning, Julian," I replied, studying him with a newfound awareness that I hoped didn't betray my inner turmoil. "How are your classes coming along?" He took a sip of his juice, leaning back against the counter as he launched into a detailed account of his recent academic endeavors. I listened attentively, nodding in all the right places, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions that were entirely unrelated to his monologue about economics and literature. As he spoke, I found myself stealing glances at him, noting the way his shirt stretched across his broadening shoulders, the stubble that darkened his jawline, the hint of muscle that flexed beneath the fabric of his pants. Julian was no longer the gangly teenager I remembered. He had blossomed into a young man of considerable stature and strength, a fact that had been driven home with startling clarity just a few hours prior. Once he had finished eating and was gathering his things to leave for the day, I knew it was time to address the issue that had been hanging over us, silently but insistently demanding attention. "Julian, before you go, there's something I'd like to talk to you about," I said, my voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in my chest. He paused, his backpack half slung over his shoulder, and turned to look at me with an expression of mild curiosity. "Sure, what's up?" I took a deep breath, feeling as though I was standing on the edge of a precipice, about to throw caution to the wind. Last night I came home earlier than expected, and I inadvertently walked in on something rather personal. The color drained from Julian's face, his eyes widening in shock as the realization dawned on him. You saw me?" I nodded, offering him a small, reassuring smile. "Yes, I did. And I want you to know that I'm not angry or disappointed. On the contrary, I understand that what you were doing is a natural part of life. A private moment that you probably didn't expect to be shared." Julian seemed to shrink into himself, his embarrassment palpable in the charged silence that followed my admission. "I can't believe this is happening," he muttered, his gaze fixed firmly on the floor. "Julian, look at me," I urged gently, waiting until his eyes met mine before continuing. "There's no reason to feel ashamed. You're a healthy, virile young man, and it's perfectly normal for you to explore your own body, but I also understand that it can be quite isolating to do so in secret." He blinked at me, clearly taken aback by the candid nature of our conversation. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I reassured him, reaching across the table to gently grasp his hand. "But I do want to offer you something, a safe space, a way to explore your desires without the need for concealment or guilt." A flicker of interest broke through the haze of his embarrassment. "What do you mean?" I squeezed his hand, my gaze unwavering as I laid out my proposition. "I'm suggesting that, if you're willing, we could arrange a time for you to be alone with your thoughts and desires, but with the knowledge that you're not truly alone, that I'm there, watching over you, providing a sense of companionship and understanding in what is normally a solitary act." Julian's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, his mind clearly racing to process the implications of what I was offering. "You're saying you want to watch me? Only if you're comfortable with the idea," I emphasized, careful to respect his autonomy in the matter. "We would establish clear boundaries, and you would maintain full control over the situation at all times. This isn't about me. It's about creating a space where you can feel free to be yourself, without fear of judgment or recrimination." He sat in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity, his eyes locked onto mine as he grappled with the enormity of my proposal. "I need to think about it," he finally said, his voice a hushed whisper. "This is a lot." "Of course, take all the time you need," I replied, releasing his hand and giving him the space to collect his thoughts. "There's absolutely no pressure, Julian. Your feelings and comfort are the most important things to me." The rest of our morning interactions were subdued, the air thick with the weight of our conversation. As Julian left for his university classes, there was a sense of unfinished business hanging between us, a thread that had been pulled taut, waiting to be either severed or woven into the fabric of our relationship. The day stretched on, the apartment silent and still in the wake of Julian's departure. I found myself lost in thought, replaying our conversation, considering the potential ramifications of my audacious proposition. It was a gamble, to be sure, but one that I believed could lead to a deeper level of trust and intimacy between us. As evening approached and the shadows lengthened across the polished hardwood floors, I felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Julian was due to return home from his classes, and I knew that we would have to revisit the subject of our new arrangement. I had laid the groundwork for a profound shift in our dynamic, and now it was up to him to decide whether he was willing to take that leap with me. I busied myself with preparing dinner, the mundane tasks providing a welcome distraction from the tumultuous thoughts that swirled in my mind. The scent of garlic and herbs filled the air, a comforting olfactory backdrop to the complex emotional landscape that I was navigating. When Julian finally walked through the front door, his expression was one of cautious contemplation. We exchanged pleasantries, and as we sat down to dinner, I could see the gears turning behind his thoughtful gaze. It was clear that he had spent the day weighing his options, considering the potential risks and rewards of the path I had laid before him. As we cleared the table together, the tension between us was almost palpable. It was now or never. The moment of truth had arrived. "Julian," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, have you given any thought to our conversation this morning? He hesitated, his hands stilling in the act of drying a dish. I've thought about it, he admitted, his eyes meeting mine with a newfound resolve. And I've decided I'm willing to give it a try. But we need to set some ground rules first. A wave of relief washed over me, followed quickly by a sense of determination. Of course, we'll take it slow and make sure we're both comfortable with everything. This is about trust and respect, above all else. Together, we outlined the parameters of our new understanding, discussing everything from the time and place of our arrangement to the signals we would use to communicate consent and comfort levels. It was a surreal experience, negotiating the terms of such an intimate pact, yet there was a certain beauty in the openness and honesty that flowed between us. As the evening drew to a close, we agreed to initiate our arrangement the following evening, giving us both time to prepare mentally and emotionally for the profound shift in our relationship. Julian retired to his room, and I was left alone with my thoughts, the weight of our decision settling over me like a soft, enveloping shroud. The following evening arrived, cloaked in the quiet anticipation of things to come. The apartment was awash in the warm glow of ambient lighting, casting a soft, flattering hue over the dining room where Julian and I were to share our meal. I had taken great care in preparing a dish that was both comforting and sophisticated, a roast chicken with herbs and lemon, accompanied by a medley of roasted vegetables and a crisp salad of mixed greens. As we took our seats across from one another, the clink of cutlery against fine china served as a rhythmic accompaniment to our conversation. We spoke of trivial matters at first: Julian's day at the university, a fascinating article I had read, the latest cultural events happening around the city. Yet as the evening wore on, our dialogue began to take on a more playful tone, laced with double entendres and knowing glances that hinted at the true nature of the evening's agenda. I must say, Julian, you seem rather engaged this evening, I observed, a coy smile playing on my lips as I sipped my wine. He returned my smile with a bemused one of his own. Well, it's not every day that we have such an intimate dinner, is it? The laughter that followed was light and shared, a moment of levity that helped to ease some of the tension that had been building since our conversation the previous morning. We lingered over our meal, the bottles of wine we opened serving to lower our inhibitions and heighten the sense of camaraderie that was rapidly evolving into something far more complex. After dinner, we retreated to the living room, where the plush cushions of the sofa beckoned us to settle in for a nightcap. Julian poured us each a glass of cognac, the rich amber liquid swirling enticingly as he handed mine over with a flourish. To new experiences, he toasted, his voice tinged with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. To new experiences, I echoed, the chime of our glasses meeting in a toast resonating through the room. We sat side by side, our bodies angled toward one another, the air charged with the electric current of unspoken desires. Our conversation meandered through various topics, each one subtly layered with innuendo and veiled references to the true purpose of our evening together. As we finished our drinks, I could sense the shift in Julian's demeanor, a quiet contemplation giving way to a burgeoning boldness. "Shall we move on to the next part of our evening?" I asked, my tone gentle yet firm, a silent affirmation of our mutual consent. Julian nodded, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my heart flutter in my chest. "Yes, let's," he replied, his voice steady despite the palpable nervousness that underscored his words. I rose from the sofa and dimmed the lights, the room transitioning into a realm of soft shadows and subdued hues. As I took my seat once again, I allowed my gaze to drift toward Julian, an unspoken invitation for him to begin. He took a deep breath, his hands resting on his thighs as he seemed to gather his courage. Then, with a look of quiet determination, he reached for the hem of his shirt and slowly lifted it over his head, revealing the toned planes of his chest and abdomen in the dimly lit room. My breath caught in my throat at the sight of him, his body a testament to the man he had become. I watched, transfixed, as he unbuttoned his jeans and slipped them off, leaving him clad only in his boxer briefs, the fabric straining against the evidence of his arousal. "Are you comfortable?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, ensuring one last time that we were both at ease with the unfolding scene. "Yes," he confirmed, his eyes meeting mine with a raw vulnerability that was both heartrending and deeply arousing. With that, Julian closed his eyes and leaned back against the sofa, his hands moving with deliberate purpose to the elastic waistband of his underwear. He paused for a moment, as if steeling himself against the flood of sensations that were sure to follow, before he slid the fabric down his hips, freeing his erection. I felt a warmth spread through my body as I took in the sight of him, his hand beginning to move along the length of his shaft, each stroke a dance of shadows and light in the dimly lit room. My own breath seemed to syncopate with the rhythm of his movements, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched him lost in the throes of his own self-pleasure. My gaze was fixed firmly upon him, a silent participant in his private moment. The lines of propriety and decorum that had once defined our relationship seemed to dissolve in the face of this raw, unbridled display of desire. Yet, there was a tenderness to the act as well, a shared understanding that what we were doing was born of trust and a deep, albeit unconventional, affection. As the minutes ticked by, Julian's breathing grew more labored, his body tense with the approaching climax. I could see the muscles in his thighs and abdomen tighten, his hand moving with increased urgency as he chased the release that awaited him. When it was over, he lay there for a moment, his chest rising and falling with each ragged breath, before he finally opened his eyes and turned to look at me. In that moment, the vulnerability I saw reflected in his gaze was a powerful reminder of the bond we had forged, a bond that transcended the traditional boundaries of our relationship and ventured into uncharted emotional territory. As I moved to rise from the sofa, intent on giving Julian the space and privacy he might need in the wake of his vulnerability, his hand reached out, gently encircling my wrist. The touch was electric, a plea for connection that sent a shiver of anticipation coursing through my veins. "Stay," he said, his voice a soft entreaty that tugged at something deep within me. "I want you to be a part of this, truly a part of it." I hesitated, the weight of his request hanging in the air between us. The boundaries we had so carefully established seemed to waver before my eyes, the roles of observer and participant beginning to blur into one another. My mind raced with the implications of what he was asking, the potential ramifications of crossing a line that had, until this moment, been sacrosanct. Yet, as I looked into Julian's eyes, I saw more than just desire reflected in their depths. There was a yearning for closeness, a longing for a connection that transcended the physical act we were contemplating. It was a call to cast aside the remnants of our previous roles and embrace the complexity of what we had become to one another. With a sense of inevitability, I nodded, my consent given with the same care and consideration that had marked every step of our journey thus far. "Okay," I whispered, my voice steady despite the flutter of nerves that danced in my stomach. "I'll stay." Julian's relief was palpable, his hand relaxing around my wrist as he guided me back down onto the sofa beside him. His touch was tentative at first, a shy exploration of the contours of my body through the fabric of my clothing. Each caress, each gentle squeeze, served to stoke the slow, burning fire that had ignited within me from the moment I first laid eyes on his exposed form. As his hands grew bolder, venturing beneath the hem of my blouse, I found myself arching into his touch, my body responding with an eagerness that belied my initial hesitation. The sensation of his fingers against my skin was both foreign and familiar, a forbidden delight that set my nerve endings alight with a fiery yearning. I could feel the evidence of his renewed arousal pressing against my hip, a tangible reminder of the effect our shared experience was having on him. It was a heady sensation, knowing that I was capable of eliciting such a response from this strong, virile young man who had entrusted me with his innermost desires. With a boldness that surprised even myself, I reached down, my hand moving in tandem with his as we explored the boundaries of our newfound intimacy. The dual sensations of giving and receiving pleasure seemed to fuse us together, creating a feedback loop of desire that left no room for doubt or regret. Our movements became more frenzied, the quiet sanctuary of the living room transformed into a private realm where nothing existed but the two of us and the powerful connection that was rapidly spiraling out of control. Julian's breath came in short, sharp gasps, his body tensing beneath my touch as he neared the precipice of another release. And then, with a low moan that seemed to come from the very depths of his being, Julian found his release once more, the warmth over my hand as I continued to stroke. The sight of him, undone and utterly vulnerable, was a powerful aphrodisiac that pushed me over the edge as well, my own body shuddering with the force that took me by surprise. In the quiet that followed, we lay there together, a tangle of limbs and whispered endearments. The lines between stepmother and stepson had been irrevocably blurred, the roles we had once inhabited now rendered obsolete by the depth of our shared experience. We had crossed a threshold that night, a boundary that could never be uncrossed. The stepson had reached out for a connection that transcended the limitations of his own hand, and the stepmother had responded with a passion that defied societal norms and expectations. In doing so, we had redefined the parameters of our relationship, forging a bond that was as beautiful as it was complex. As we eventually disentangled ourselves and made our way to our respective rooms, I knew that there was no going back to the way things had been before. We had embarked on a journey that would forever alter the course of our lives, a journey marked by moments of profound connection and the indelible memory of a night that had changed us both in ways we were only beginning to understand. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a golden glow across the kitchen as I busied myself with the familiar routines of breakfast preparation. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the aroma of sizzling bacon, a sensory reminder of the normalcy that had once defined our mornings. Yet as I set the table for two, I couldn't ignore the undercurrent of tension that hummed beneath the surface of our shared domesticity. Julian entered the kitchen, his steps hesitant, his gaze cautious as it met mine. We exchanged polite greetings, the words mere vessels for the unspoken thoughts and feelings that threatened to overwhelm us. As we took our seats across from one another, the events of the previous night seemed to hang in the air, a palpable presence that neither of us was yet ready to acknowledge. We ate in silence, the clinking of cutlery against plates serving as a stark contrast to the comfortable banter that had once filled our mornings. I watched Julian from beneath my lashes, noting the way his eyes seemed to avoid mine, the subtle flush that crept across his cheeks when our hands accidentally brushed against each other. Finally, as we neared the end of our meal, Julian cleared his throat, his fingers drumming a nervous tattoo on the tablecloth. "About last night," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to say, your touch was different. It felt professional." A surge of relief washed over me at his words, a validation of the care and restraint I had exercised in our intimate encounter. "I'm glad you felt that way, Julian. It was important to me that we both felt comfortable and respected throughout the experience." He nodded, his eyes meeting mine with a newfound earnestness. "I did. Feel comfortable, I mean. And I was thinking, maybe we could do it again sometime." The suggestion, while not entirely unexpected, sent a ripple of trepidation mixed with anticipation coursing through my veins. We were treading on delicate ground, each step forward carrying the potential for both profound connection and irrevocable heartache. Yet, as I looked into Julian's eyes, I saw a glimmer of hope, a desire for continued exploration that resonated with my own unspoken longings. "If that's something you truly want, then we can certainly discuss the possibility," I replied, my tone measured and calm, belying the tumultuous emotions that churned within me. "We must continue to communicate openly and establish clear boundaries to ensure that our arrangement remains healthy and consensual." Julian's shoulders visibly relaxed, the tension that had been building within him seeming to dissipate with my affirmation of his request. "Of course, I understand. Last night, it meant a lot to me, and I think it could be good for us to continue exploring this new aspect of our relationship." I reached across the table, my hand covering his in a gesture of reassurance and solidarity. "Then we'll take it one step at a time, always mindful of each other's feelings and comfort levels. Our connection is unique and precious, and I believe it's worth nurturing, regardless of societal expectations or norms. We finished our breakfast, the conversation gradually shifting to more mundane topics, plans for the day, upcoming university assignments, and the like. Yet beneath the surface, there was a subtle shift in our dynamic, a recognition of the shared journey we had embarked upon, and the mutual consent that underpinned our every interaction. As Julian stood to leave for his classes, he paused, turning to look at me with a mixture of gratitude and unspoken affection. "Thank you for everything. I'll see you tonight?" I smiled, a sense of peace settling over me as I acknowledged the path we had chosen together. "Yes, Julian. I'll see you tonight." With that, he left the apartment, the click of the front door serving as a punctuation mark to the start of a new chapter in our lives. Alone once more, I allowed myself to reflect on the profound changes that had taken place in such a short span of time. The roles of stepmother and stepson had been irrevocably altered, redefined by the mutual respect and understanding that had come to the fore in our recent interactions. As the day unfolded, my thoughts often drifted back to Julian and the unconventional bond we were forging. The evening ahead held the promise of further exploration, a chance to delve deeper into the complex tapestry of our shared desires. It was a path fraught with challenges and potential pitfalls, yet I found myself looking forward to the journey with a sense of cautious optimism. The knowledge that Julian viewed our experience as something positive, even therapeutic, was a balm to any lingering doubts I might have harbored about the propriety of our actions. We were charting a course through uncharted territory, guided by a mutual commitment to honesty, respect, and the pursuit of a connection that transcended the conventional boundaries of our relationship. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the apartment was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, I prepared myself for Julian's return. The anticipation that hummed in my veins was a testament to the depth of my involvement in his life. An involvement that had taken a turn I could never have predicted, but one that I had come to embrace with my entire being. As the day waned, casting long shadows across the cityscape outside our windows, I found myself anxiously anticipating the evening ahead. The hours had passed in a blur of domestic tasks and quiet introspection, each tick of the clock bringing me closer to the moment when Julian and I would once again come together in our shared exploration of desire and connection. The apartment was awash in the soft glow of evening when I heard the familiar sound of his key turning in the lock. My heart leapt in my chest, a symphony of nerves and excitement performing an intricate dance within the confines of my ribcage. I had taken special care with my appearance that evening, choosing attire that was both comfortable and alluring, a subtle nod to the nature of our unspoken agreement. Julian stepped through the front door, his presence filling the room with an energy that was both comforting and utterly electrifying. "Hello," he greeted me, his voice a warm caress that seemed to envelop me in its tender embrace. "Welcome back," I replied, offering him a smile that I hoped conveyed both my affection and my readiness to honor the terms of our arrangement. "I trust your day was productive?" He nodded, setting his backpack down by the door before making his way over to where I stood. It was, though I must admit, my thoughts were rather preoccupied with the evening to come. The frankness of his admission sent a thrill coursing through me, a clear indication that we were both fully committed to the path we had chosen. "I'm glad to hear it. I too have been looking forward to our time together." We shared a quiet moment, the air between us charged with the promise of what was to unfold. Julian's eyes held a mixture of anticipation and a hint of vulnerability, a reminder that despite his newfound confidence, he was still navigating the complexities of our unconventional bond. "Shall we?" he asked, extending his hand toward me in a silent invitation. I accepted his offered hand, our fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both familiar and entirely new. "Yes, let's." Together, we moved to the living room, the dimmed lighting and plush furnishings setting the stage for our repeat performance. Julian picked up the remote control and switched on the television, queuing up a video that was known for its explicit content, a catalyst for the desires we had only just begun to explore. As the video played, the actors on screen engaging in acts of unrestrained passion, I felt a warmth spread through my body, a visceral response to the imagery that seemed to heighten my awareness of Julian's presence beside me. I could feel the heat radiating from his skin, the rhythm of his breathing growing more pronounced as he became increasingly aroused by the unfolding scenes. After a few moments, he turned to me, his gaze intense and filled with unspoken need. "I want you to be a part of this with me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Would you help me?" The vulnerability in his request was a potent aphrodisiac, a testament to the trust he placed in me to guide him through the murky waters of our shared desires. "Of course, Julian. I'm here for you, in whatever way you need." With that, I reached out, my hand finding his and giving it a reassuring squeeze. Our eyes remained locked on one another as I allowed my touch to wander, tracing the contours of his body with a reverence that bordered on worship. Each gasp and shudder that rippled through him served as a silent affirmation of the connection that was deepening between us with every passing second. As my hand ventured lower, encountering the evidence of his arousal through the fabric of his pants, Julian's breath hitched in his throat, a clear sign of his escalating need. "Please," he murmured, the single word encapsulating a world of longing and desire. In response, I deftly unfastened his belt, my fingers working with practiced ease to free him from the constraints of his clothing. The act was both a submission to his need and an assertion of my own role in this delicate dance of pleasure and vulnerability. As I began to pleasure him with long, languid moves, Julian's head fell back against the sofa, his eyes fluttering closed as he surrendered to the wave of sensations that coursed through his body. The sight of him, lost in the throes of his own unbridled desire, was a powerful aphrodisiac that stoked the flames of my own burgeoning arousal. Our movements became more frenzied, the sounds of our combined pleasure mingling with the explicit audio emanating from the television. It was a symphony of desire, a testament to the depth of our connection and the boldness with which we were choosing to embrace it. Then, in a moment of unbridled passion, Julian reached for me, his hand cupping the back of my neck as he pulled me toward him. Our lips met in a kiss that was both a homecoming and a revelation, a tender yet fervent exploration that spoke of shared secrets and the unspoken bonds that held us together. The kiss deepened, our tongues intertwining in a dance that mirrored the rhythm of our joined hands below. It was a crossing of a sacred threshold, a tangible expression of the love and desire that had blossomed between us in the face of societal norms and expectations. As our embrace intensified, Julian's hands began to explore the curves and contours of my body, each touch a silent promise of the pleasure that was yet to come. I responded in kind, my fingers delving beneath the fabric of his clothing to caress the warm, bare skin that lay beneath. The escalation of our passion was inevitable, a natural progression from the careful exploration of our previous encounters to the unrestrained expression of our mutual desire. We undressed one another with a reverence that bordered on sacred, our eyes drinking in the sight of each other's exposed forms. When at last we were both completely bare, Julian's hands trembled slightly as he guided me down onto the sofa beside him. The intensity of his gaze as he positioned himself above me was a clear indication of the depth of his feelings, a mixture of desire, tenderness, and a profound sense of connection that transcended the physical act we were about to undertake. Our lovemaking was a slow, languid exploration, a celebration of the bond that had been forged in the fires of our shared desires. Julian's every touch, every kiss, every whispered endearment served as a reminder that we were no longer simply stepmother and stepson. We were partners in the truest sense of the word, bound together by a connection that was as beautiful as it was complex. As we reached the pinnacle of our shared pleasure, our bodies moving in unison toward the inevitable release, I knew that we had crossed a point of no return. The act of lovemaking that had begun as an exploration of desire had evolved into something far more profound, an act of union that had irrevocably entwined our fates. In the aftermath, as we lay tangled in each other's arms, the silence that enveloped us was a comfortable one, filled with the unspoken knowledge of what we had just experienced. Julian pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead, a silent acknowledgement of the journey we had undertaken together, a journey that had altered the course of our lives forever. In the days that followed, Julian and I settled into a new rhythm, one that was punctuated by the ebb and flow of our deepening connection. Our interactions were a delicate balance of domestic normalcy and the electric thrill of our clandestine explorations, each moment a thread in the tapestry of our unconventional relationship. Mornings were spent in a comfortable silence, the shared glances and knowing smiles across the breakfast table serving as silent reminders of the intimacy we had come to share. We spoke in hushed tones of trivial matters, the mundane conversations a stark contrast to the undercurrent of desire that simmered just below the surface. As Julian attended his university classes, I found myself lost in thought, reflecting on the profound shift that had occurred between us. The afternoons stretched out before me, a canvas of possibility that was both exhilarating and daunting in its implications. I busied myself with work and household tasks, all the while acutely aware of the clock ticking down the hours until Julian's return. Each evening, we reconvened in the sanctuary of our shared living space, the familiar surroundings a backdrop to our continued exploration of one another. The rituals we established were both a comfort and a catalyst for the desires that had become an integral part of our dynamic. We conversed, we laughed, we shared, each interaction a step further into the unknown territory of our bond. Our evenings often culminated in the living room, where the soft glow of lamplight cast a warm hue over our bare skin. The intimacy we shared was a tapestry of touch and taste, each encounter a study in the art of mutual pleasure and the boundaries of our physical connection. The world outside ceased to exist as we lost ourselves in the pursuit of a shared ecstasy that was both a refuge and a revelation. As the nights deepened, we lay entwined, the silence of the apartment a testament to the depth of our trust in one another. Julian's head rested against my chest, his breaths slow and even as sleep began to claim him. In those quiet moments, I found myself reflecting on the path that had led us here, a path marked by unexpected turns and the courage to embrace the complexities of our evolving relationship. In the solitude of our shared bed, I pondered the future, the unspoken questions that lingered at the edges of my consciousness. What would become of us, of this delicate balance we had so carefully constructed? Yet, as Julian's hand found mine in the darkness, I was reminded of the strength of our connection, a bond that had been forged in vulnerability and the unwavering belief that what we shared was worth the risk. And so, we continued on, day by day, our lives intertwined in a dance of passion and tenderness. The world outside might judge, might seek to impose its own narrow definitions of love and family, but within the walls of our home, Julian and I had carved out a space that was uniquely ours, a sanctuary where we were free to explore the depths of our desire and the boundless potential of our shared future.